Again, I'm Brad Proctor, and I'm here today to talk a little bit about David Esrati. I met David I moved in the city of Dayton in August of 1990, bought a nice little spot up in the Belmont, Linden Heights area. Picked out, I think we paid about $37,000 for the house. It was a fixer-upper. A friend of mine, Mark and Karen Shaver, who worked for the city at the time, helped me find it, and it was a real gem on the inside and had its challenges on the outside, so like many of the houses in the community do. And I spent the next 10 years fixing that house up and, got it to a really nice position. But somewhere along that time frame, along comes a knock at my door. And then at my door is a guy named David Esrati, and he's running for mayor of the city of Dayton. And he stood on my porch, and we probably talked about a half an hour, and we had an opportunity to talk about something, a guy who completely was a different view, I think. And it was interesting because the next day I called my friends and said, "What do you know about this guy David Esrati?" And so, like many of us, we tend to, from others, get a different view of people that know people versus people that only hear about or have second communications with them. And so David was one of those unique individuals that was trying to make a difference. And here we are 20 years later, I think, approximately. And the idea is he's still probably one of the most dedicated persons I've ever met that wants to serve the community. And and it's interesting because you either love him or you hate him. There just seems to be nothing in between. And if I had to, oddly enough, I think there's one other guy that I am aware of is in that exact same position, and that's like a guy like Rush Limbaugh. And I'm not trying to put these two people together, but the reality is, there are people that know David Esrati, but if you see him on the street, they'll say, "Well, I don't know who's David Esrati." Same thing with the Rush Limbaugh. The idea is, but one of us, our own homegrown, talent that we have in our own community, and talent is a word that has to be associated with David. If you've seen the work that his company does, it's just phenomenal. Not only is he talented, but he brings in a great crew over these 20 years, and they do some fantastic work in the community. David's probably one of the most prolific writers I've ever seen in my life. I'm very envious. I had a magazine I wrote here in Dayton for a number of years, and only somebody who's had to have a deadline like that can understand the value of what comes naturally to a guy like David Esrati. But here we are 20 years later. David has tried several attempts to run for mayor. It's interesting, a lot of times David writes one of the most prolific blogs, I guess is the proper term for that, in the community. Interestingly enough, he seems to somehow, while not the mainstream media, he seems to scoop a lot of the mainstream media out there in terms of what it is, because people have come to know him over the years. And it's an interesting place to have a dialogue as with David. He asks questions. He's not tied to anyone. And many times he does it at his own literally goes to his own length. By putting some of the things, the ideas out there, he knows that becomes a target for his own livelihood. But that's David. He's going to always be that way. He'll always be that way. But he clearly is somebody who has always thought a little differently outside of the box. I'm probably one of those people too. Clearly he has some ideas and that probably I would agree with, and he clearly has some ideas that I probably wouldn't agree with. But that's the way it is with, I think, everybody on the planet. It's interesting because I've known David. I've tried to do some business with him in the past, and literally, you get kind of a view, the highlight reels, the 20-second sound bites you hear about him or you read in the paper. He's a different guy, and so that's all I would suggest to anybody. We have a much wider audience today. You're running for Congress, correct? Correct. And the idea is today it's much bigger than the opportunity in the city of Dayton to be able to talk to a guy like David Esrati and see what his ideas. So the question becomes: do you listen to other people's attempts to describe David Esrati, or do you listen to David Esrati? And I would challenge anybody. It's one of those things where get to know the person and see the opportunity. So that would be my kind of take on things.
I'm David Esrati, and I approve this message.